Hey now, this is Getting Over, and I am Adam Silverstein, here to welcome you to the start of this journey into professional wrestling audio as we aim to fill what I see as a void by covering this wacky mix and sports and entertainment, well, the way it should be covered in this medium. Whether you are a listener who's been with me for the last few years and followed the development of this podcast on Twitter, or you're a first-timer just tuning in, what you will see right off the top is that my aim is to provide the absolute best listening experience for you while having a lot of fun doing it. What you can expect from Getting Over is 2 fast-paced episodes of thoughtful wrestling analysis each week. Each show is going to be a mix of deep dives into important subjects, as well as some quick looks at the latest news and developments in the world of pro wrestling. Tuesday's show will recap WWE. It airs just one day after Raw, a couple days after SmackDown. Thursday's show is going to break down AEW Dynamite and NXT just hours after those programs end. Getting Over will also bring you instant reactions to major breaking news and instant analysis of every WWE and AEW pay-per-view just minutes after they go off the air. We're going to pay attention to you guys, the listeners, answering fan questions, discussing topics you bring up, and we're also going to go beyond WWE, NXT, and AEW, covering the biggest moments on the NJPW calendar along with the rest of the world is pro wrestling, as there's never been more easily accessible at your fingertips. So as we progress through this journey here at Getting Over, you're going to hear improved audio quality, sound drops that you've come to know and love, and refined production. But all of that is going to come in due time. 2020 is obviously just getting started. WrestleMania 36 is right around the corner. So I wanted to strike while the iron was hot, pay off the passion and enthusiasm that you all showed on Twitter. And I mean, some of you even sent me legit letters in the mail, which was kind of strange, but I still loved it and really appreciated it when I proposed starting this journey. So with that said, you guys as listeners, your support is absolutely crucial here. So please remember to follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast, and wherever you're listening to the show, but particularly if you're doing it on iTunes, keep the audio running while dropping us a 5-star review. Let us know what you think of the show. Let us know how excited you are. Absolutely cannot wait to bring this to you. And with that, it is time to welcome in a man who will be, let's call him the primary co-host here at Getting Over. You may know him as a former co-host of The Masked Man Show. You may know him as an accomplished writer in a variety of mediums. Or more recently, you may know him as NBA Outsider Scoop D. But however you know him, his name is Dave Schilling. Dave, absolutely thrilled to have you part of this podcast.
Hi, thank you. I can't believe you introduced me with my parody NBA reporter persona, but thank you. I'd also like to add former WWE writer.
Well, I was going to let you kind of bring that up yourself for sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, I just did. So congratulations.
No, look, if as an NBA insider, which you are starting to become, it seems, you're 1 for 1 as far as I'm concerned. So I don't know what kind of better percentage is better than batting 1,000.
1,001.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, you're going to have a little bit longer to get there. Let's see if you go beyond Chris Paul and maybe execute some type of other acquisition for the Knicks. Maybe a Stephon Marbury coming back to the team.
I've already done enough.
Well, what we're going to do in this first, let's call it pilot episode here of Getting Over, is a little bit of a getting to know you. I think a lot of you listening to the show are familiar with me, coming over from State of Combat with Brian Campbell, previously known as In This Corner. Basically ran nearly 3 years weekly wrestling podcast. Honestly, I don't think I missed a single episode. Dave, certainly many of you are familiar with him long-term from the Masked Man Show. And if you're listening to this for the first time, there's a good chance you've never heard me before. So I kind of wanted to take Dave and I through our wrestling lives and give you all a closer look at how we became wrestling fans, our journey as fans, when we stopped watching, if we ever did, and kind of where we sit now with 2020 being such a massive year in the world of professional wrestling. So I'll kind of start with how I first got into it. And it's not like the greatest story either, because I was 8 or 9 years old. I don't particularly remember, but my parents were divorced and I hated being at my father's house. But I was also a little too old to like just sit watching cartoons all day. That didn't really interest me anymore. So I happened to, at like 10 a.m. one morning, again, this is a long, long time ago, 22 years ago or so, I'm flipping through the channels in my bedroom, like trying to figure out how to not go downstairs and like hang out with him and things like that. And I come across WWF Superstars. And I vividly remember the first thing I ever saw on my TV screen was Tatanka. And I just fell in love. Maybe it was a distraction, which I think a lot of people do use pro wrestling as escapism from real life, and maybe that's what it was at the time. But I fell in love with it, and it became a weekly part of my habit. Was, when I was home with my mom, I was doing normal things, living life as a kid, but I was at my dad's house every weekend, and I always made sure to waste as much time as I could in my room watching WWF Superstars in the morning. So that's how I initially got into it. It wasn't a family thing. No one I knew really liked wrestling growing up. Dave, how did everything start with you watching wrestling?
My dad was a fan, not a hardcore fan, but someone who was interested in it. And one day, I don't remember what the day was, but we just sat down and watched it, and I sort of was amazed by it. It was also just everywhere on television at the time, and I think it's still everywhere on television today. There was Superstars, there was Challenge, there was Primetime Wrestling, there was WCW Saturday Night, there was WCW Main Event, there was Clash of the Champions, there were pay-per-views. It's not like wrestling has become ubiquitous just all of a sudden now. There was always too much wrestling on television. There was Global Championship Wrestling, or Global GWF, Global Wrestling Federation, on ESPN, and ESPN had the AWA. So it was always just around all the time. And the year that really kind of captured me was 1991 for some reason. The sort of the tail end of 91, SummerSlam, the match made in heaven, the match made in hell was a huge deal for me. I remember begging my parents to order the pay-per-view because I wanted to see Macho Man and Elizabeth get married. I wasn't interested that much in Sergeant Slaughter and Hulk Hogan, though I had obviously been watching during WrestleMania season that year. But it was Macho Man and Elizabeth getting married, to the point where I called the hotline to listen to the pre-recorded messages that they left for people, for well wishers, of like, I'm so nervous, I'm in the locker room right now, and I'm not sure if Randy is as nervous as I am. And I was hoping, because the part of the advertising was some of you might actually get to talk to Macho or Elizabeth for real, and I was fingers crossed, hoping I get to talk to Macho Man, but that didn't happen. And then really got hooked at the end of that angle when Jake Roberts and The Undertaker came into the reception.
Right.
And then I was like, oh no, these evil people are threatening this pure, wonderful love. I had no idea Macho and Elizabeth were previously married and divorced, and not really that excited about doing it, or the angle and stuff. But I was hooked from there. And then you have Undertaker and Hogan at Survivor Series that year, and Undertaker winning the title, and that was shocking. Going into Ric Flair coming into the company, and it was just, there was a lot going on at that time, and I think a lot of people remember that era of WWF more fondly than I think older fans or younger fans understand, because it was a down period in the industry in terms of business. WrestleMania 8 wasn't by and large successful.
Right.
It was a 2-match card with a horrendous final match, and it didn't sell out. So it's looked at as kind of a weird transitional period in the company's history, but it was exactly what I was looking for when I was a young kid. It hooked me. It was great characters. It was well-written stories that had great payoffs, and it was a wonderful time. And that's why I'm a wrestling fan today, is 91, 92 WWF.
It's funny because 91 I missed, but it actually did start for me probably about 6 months after that WrestleMania in 92. It's when I started watching, and Tatanka was introduced on TV. He had that long win. It's so weird that Tatanka is why I like wrestling, but he had that long winning streak on TV. I think he feuded with the model Rick Martel over his feathers. There was a whole thing going on. It's really not very clear in my mind every single step of the way, but I do remember his undefeated streak. He won a battle royal, and WrestleMania 9 was coming up, and he was supposed to face Shawn Michaels for the Intercontinental Championship. And then you also had, I think Yokozuna and Bret Hart was the main event that year. And I vividly remember like being home, and for some reason it was a weekend, I was with my mom, and I begged her to let me order the pay-per-view. And she's like, there's no way I'm spending, I don't even know how much it was back then. There's no way I'm spending that. You don't even watch it, because I'd never watched it at her house. She was, this doesn't make, like, I'm not going to do it. And I remember learning that Tatanka, I guess maybe the following week on Superstars, learning that Tatanka won the Intercontinental title from Shawn Michaels, and then finding out that the whole thing with Bret and Yokozuna and then Hulk Hogan. And so I missed really the golden era of WWF, the Hulk Hogan, the Macho Man, just that really that the part that really made most people fans in the 80s. I was too young, and crossing into the 90s, I kind of caught WWF when it was making that transition into the beginning of the next generation era, the new generation era, which you can say, well, in retrospect, if I, as an adult now, started watching it then, I would never watch it, because it's, maybe the storylines were okay. Like you said, maybe they did pay some things off. That's true, but the characters were terrible, right? As it turns out, that at that age is what caught me. Just like the way I progressed through the years, the Attitude Era hit me at just the right time. I was a teenager. I wasn't necessarily that rebellious, but I think all teenagers to some degree are. Certainly I cared a lot more about, let's candidly, the TNA, having Sable on my TV, Austin giving middle fingers and drinking beer, The Rock being a total badass, than I did about like work rate and quality of matches. But the Attitude Era came along at just the right time for me, Dave. And I was never, ever in my entire life a WCW guy. I think during the Monday Night Wars, it is something that I certainly watched. I would flick back and forth. I would try to keep up with what was happening with the NWO. But when Hall and Nash went over there, it didn't pull me off of WWF. I was loyal still. I knew the product wasn't as good. I knew my friends were that never watched wrestling before were getting into WCW and were really excited about what was happening with the NWO. But it never really fazed me. And I'm wondering, considering you got your start with WWF as well, if that was the case for you.
No, WCW took me from the WWF for 3 years, 2 years, maybe.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I vividly remember the first Nitro, and famously, there was no live Raw that night, and so they were going unopposed. I was like, well, okay, I'm gonna give this a shot. I'd always watched WCW. I watched Saturday Night because eventually you just become a wrestling fan. At least, I did. And you obviously have now, but I think everybody eventually is like, okay, I like this one thing, but I'm also going to sample other things.
Sure.
So because WCW was so readily available and Global was on ESPN, I started watching other wrestling. And so I was always aware of WCW. I knew the characters. I knew Sting. I knew Vader. I knew all of those people. I remember watching Halloween Havoc, Spin the Wheel, Make the Deal, and being so engaged in that too. Oddly enough, I thought that was cool. But Nitro was so different. I couldn't believe, one, that it was live. Two, it was taking place in a mall. Three, they had like really impressive, almost like traditional sports level establishing shots of the city. Like WWF never showed you the outside of the arena. What was happening outside didn't matter. What was happening in the real world didn't matter. When you turn on a WWF television show at that time, all that mattered was what was happening in the arena. But this was, it felt like live sports in a really cool way. And so I dutifully watched Nitro as much as I could when Raw came back. But what really got me to be a WCW person was the NWO. As soon as I found out that Scott Hall was going to WCW, I had to tune in every week because it was like someone acknowledging reality instead of pretending that these things that there was no other wrestling. Because I was starting to get old enough to where I thought, this is obviously on purpose that they don't talk about each other. Why do they not talk about each other? Mm-hmm. Granted, I my first really hardcore year of watching wrestling was the Real World's champion Ric Flair and all of that stuff. But the thing about that angle is they never said WCW. They didn't say they started not showing the belt, all that stuff that made that rivalry feel tangible.
Mm-hmm.
And there was danger, there was uncertainty, there was spontaneity to Nitro that Raw didn't have. Raw was taped.
Yep.
Raw was taped most of the time at that point. The angles and the characters were abysmal. The show was bad. I don't think anyone can deny that show was bad.
Oh, yeah.
And the ratings tanked because of it. And so watching Nitro just was a better experience. It was a better television program for many years. And so there were many years of WWF I just didn't watch. I wasn't watching during the Montreal Screwjob.
Oh, wow. See, that's interesting because I think for me it was, I don't want to say like a Stockholm Syndrome type of thing, but I was young, so right after I was starting watching in 92, they debut Raw, right? And it's a show I can't necessarily watch because I'm not staying up late, but I'm taping it on a VCR and I see the 1-2-3 Kid beat Razor Ramon and it's crazy. And WrestleMania 10 is incredible. And which is the first pay-per-view I ever ordered, by the way. So I'm hooked with these characters and I don't think I cared much to experience anything outside of it. But similar to you, there was a time period, I think right before Hall and Nash switched and went over to WCW and formed the NWO, where, I had just gotten like a computer and I had AOL and I started going into the AOL wrestling chat rooms because it was something I was interested in. And as I mentioned before, I didn't really have a lot of friends to talk wrestling with. We were all into sports and other things as well, but wrestling was something that was uniquely mine. So I started going in these chat rooms and seemingly making friends you never know at that age. And I can't even believe I was in chat rooms at that age, especially when you think about like how things are now. But I started at seriously, 13 years old, a wrestling newsletter. And it was called Top Rope Newsletter. And I vividly remember going from kind of just taking things from other people and kind of, crediting them. I think I was decently journalistic at that time to still understand what's right and what's wrong. But from doing that to actually getting to know people at local shows and getting a couple sources. And it was this weird thing throughout high school where I'm watching WWF and I am watching ECW, was really into ECW big time. But WCW just never did it for me. And I don't know if it was a tribalism thing because I was a WWF fan and I had waited it out. And maybe because I wasn't watching Nitro, so I didn't necessarily understand the difference between WCW and WWF before the Hall and Nash went over there and then WWE responded with the Attitude Era. But I was always WWF. And then I do remember there was a 3-week or 4-week period of time where I don't even remember the specific angle, but WCW got me. And they said, you're not a child anymore. You should be watching this product instead. And they got me for a month, but I think it was that 1 month, right before Austin started bubbling up. And then once Austin did the 316 and won the King of the Ring, and you saw the momentum change in WWF, when I switched back, it was forever. I mean, there was no going back to Nitro once you made that switch back to Raw because WWE, and you got to give them credit for it, at least in my opinion, they understood at that time, and it's something that you can say they don't understand now, but they understood what wasn't working. And once they decided to fix it, they went all in that direction. That won me back. I was also getting older, obviously, as a teenager. And as I said, I was taping ECW at midnight on my local Fox station because not because I couldn't necessarily stay up, but I didn't. But I remember setting a VCR in order to tape ECW. And I started having collections of ECW tapes that I would watch with my friends because it was so freaking insane. And because of that diet of wrestling, WCW was just something I never got into. I never once ordered a WCW pay-per-view. I didn't even really watch any of them. I mean, I had seen matches online certainly over the years, but I don't think I watched a full front-to-back WCW pay-per-view until the WWE Network started, and I was able to go back and watch them all. So that was my diet of wrestling, really, as a child into my teen years. And then once, 2002 hit, which was my senior year of high school, I stopped watching because I knew I was going to college. I ended up rushing a fraternity and doing that, and I had a ton of fun, but it significantly cut out time for me where I could watch wrestling. And that coincided with WWE buying WCW, the invasion angle not really working at the start. And that's kind of where I stopped watching. I missed not necessarily the entire Ruthless Aggression era. It depends how long you think it lasted. But the part that's airing on the network now, 2002 through 2004 or 5, I didn't watch any wrestling whatsoever. I'm wondering, did you have any similar type of, not necessarily falling out, but any extended stretch between the Attitude Era and the NWO era to now where you just completely stopped watching wrestling?
Well, just to go back a little bit, I went back to WWF too. I went back, I think it was like full time going back was probably 99, like going into, WrestleMania 15. Cause the Rock, was the character that got me back. It wasn't Austin. I liked Austin enough. I got why people liked Austin, but it wasn't appealing to me the way that The Rock was appealing to me. His arrogance and sort of flashiness. I always liked the flashy, cocky heels. I loved DiBiase. I loved Flair. I loved Rick Martel. So that got me back. And then I was in from then on, because 98 was basically the last good year of WCW. And so 98, 99, that was the end for me. I think, and it was the end for most people. I still watch Nitro, but it was horrible. It was so bad. Mm-hmm. And then, 2001, like for you was a kind of a crucial year. WrestleMania 17 was like the end of that entire era to me. It felt like the end of a novel. Austin turning heel and joining with Mr. McMahon. You can't go back. Right. Once you pull the trigger on that stupid angle, then you can't go back. It still makes me mad to think about how short-sighted and dumb that decision was. Anyway, in 2001, I'm going along for the ride with the invasion. It's cool enough, but not as cool as it should have been. Obviously, I look back on it less harshly than most people do. I think most people say it's the worst thing WWE ever did. I've been watching long enough to say that's not true.
Definitely not true. Yeah.
There were some great moments. Austin coming back from the bar and giving everybody in the Alliance a stunner was an amazing moment. If they had just let it happen and let him turn back babyface, maybe they would have saved the whole thing. But they didn't. All of the stuff with Austin and Angle was amazing. They were so good together. There were a lot of great things about Austin in that period, even though they basically ruined his character for the rest of his career. Mm-hmm. But that's neither here nor there. 2002, I'm still in. I marked out for Jericho finally winning the title for real, getting to headline WrestleMania. You can never take that away from him. That was the main event. I know people like to poo-poo that, but that was the last match on the card. That's the main event.
Absolutely.
The last match on the card is the main event. And I was always a Jericho mark from the WCW era, so it was really great to see him succeed on that level. And then Hogan and Rock obviously was, another dream match I never thought I was going to see. That was a real dream match. Say what you want about Goldberg and Roman Reigns. That's no one's dreaming about that. I don't.
It's a nightmare.
Sleep. Yeah, I don't lose sleep over Goldberg and Roman Reigns wrestling at WrestleMania 36. I don't. But Hogan and Rock, two legitimate icons. It was hard to turn off that show at that time because it was so amazing to see Hogan back, see the NWO and WWE, all that stuff. So WrestleMania 18 is not as fondly remembered as 17, which I still think is the best WWF pay-per-view of all time. Yeah. And I'm sure some people will say Canadian Stampede or something like that. Well, they're wrong. It's WrestleMania 17. Sorry. And then 19, I'm still in for WrestleMania 19. I was a Kurt Angle mark. I was a Brock Lesnar mark. I was really hoping that Brock would take as the next big thing, so to speak, and it just never worked. A lot of the stuff that was going on at that time didn't work, but I was still watching. It wasn't until I guess 2004, no, 2005 was probably when I was like, I'm done. I was in college. I was still watching here and there and stuff, and I'd watch when I'd go home. But 2005, I moved to San Francisco to finish college because I transferred from one school to another. And once I was in a big city, I didn't have any interest in watching wrestling anymore. It was not cool anymore, and I didn't need to watch it because I had a million other things to do. Because I was in a big city that had stuff to do instead of a small town or a college town. So wrestling was over for me for most of John Cena's run.
Yeah,
on top.
Same.
I loved Cena when Cena was the Doctor of Thugonomics. I was a big fan. I thought this guy is the next Steve Austin. But I missed the transition basically from him being, an Attitude Era knockoff to what he became, the PG John Cena.
Right.
The Marine John Cena.
Yeah, the new age Hogan for Vince. The more modern Hogan. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I saw the beginnings of it. I saw him win the title for the first time when he beat JBL. We got that WrestleMania. But that was the end. WrestleMania 21 was basically like, all right, I think I'm losing interest in this. And then eventually I lost all interest in it. And to the point where I was like, I think wrestling sucks. I became the person who would make fun of my brother for still watching it.
Right.
And I feel bad that I did that because then, of course, I came back.
Well,
like everybody did.
Yeah, that's what's interesting because I think we align. We're really just like 6 months to a year off in terms of our paths through being professional wrestling fans. Because, like I said, I did stop watching when I was in college, but towards the end of college, which was 05-06 for me. So I missed Thugonomics, Cena. I missed the Ruthless Aggression era completely, as I said earlier. I was just watching WrestleManias. I used to download the WrestleManias from wherever, via torrent, I guess it was back then, or whatever the case. And I would watch them like in my dorm room because it was Mania, and you're not going to miss it. You can stop watching wrestling, but you're not really going to miss WrestleMania completely if you're a true fan, or if you ever were a true fan. So I would still watch Mania, but I didn't really know what was happening outside of the people that were familiar to me. So John Cena, I had no idea who this guy was. But in 05-06, we moved into an apartment for my senior year. And I remember the cable guy came and he gave us DVRs for all of our rooms. So as I was setting recordings, I was like, you know what? I'm going to record Raw and SmackDown. Let me see what they're doing. I don't have to watch it. It'll be on the DVR. I'll watch it whenever. Well, what ended up happening? I watched it, right? Because you can fast forward through the commercials and you can watch a 2-hour show or a 3-hour show in basically half the time, especially if there's part that you don't really care about. You can get it maybe done in 60 to 75 minutes. So all of a sudden, I'm starting to watch Raw and SmackDown again. I'm at least knowing what the storylines are. And then I graduate. I move back into my mom's house back in South Florida, and I worked. I got a job right away, a pretty good job, made a actually pretty decent amount of money. But my job was in Sunrise, Florida. I lived in Boca Raton, Florida. For anyone that knows South Florida, you're talking about, and I'm not comparing traffic, trust me, to LA. I know for you, it's not even a comparison, but you're talking about a good 50-minute drive each way each day. There's not a lot of time there, at least Monday through Friday, for personal life. Maybe Friday happy hour and weekends, but Monday through Friday, you're exhausted from work. I'm just out of college. I'm not loving my life, but I have wrestling on my DVR again because my mom had a DVR as well. So all of a sudden, I'm catching back up with wrestling. And yeah, I'm pirating the pay-per-views because I'm not paying for them. And I just get right back into it. Now, it's not the same passion that I had in high school. No question, the Attitude Era brought something out in me. But it brought that sense of like, oh yeah, there's this whole other area of entertainment beyond sports, which I love, beyond movies and TV, which I also love. And I think you and I are similar in that regard. Where it's like, oh yeah, there's this whole other genre, and I've been missing out on this. I felt like I was missing out. And really since around 2007, I would say, I've watched consistently. Now, I haven't necessarily gotten into analyzing pro wrestling to the level that we will on the show and that I did previously until I got that opportunity. I certainly was never one of those message board posters. I wasn't on Reddit or any of that. But I did start rewatching wrestling probably about 13 years ago, and it has not stopped since. Is that the case with you as well?
It was not 2007. And I was a message board poster in the 90s and early 2000s. I was big on message boards and stuff. And I wrote some things for some of the wrestling sites back then. I think 411 Mania was the one that I did most of my writing for at the time. And I was big on that message board. But I didn't come back till 2013. Mm-hmm. So Daniel Bryan was what kind of brought me back. Because people I knew who had no interest in wrestling were talking about Daniel Bryan. I'm like, what is this Daniel Bryan thing? So I tuned in to see that, and WrestleMania 31 I watched. That was the first WrestleMania I had watched in forever. I got the network for that. I think the network is really what did it. Is being able to be both nostalgic for my childhood, but also to be able to catch up on the new product and see the similarities and differences between the new and the old. And then, I started doing the podcast. I did one episode of Cheap Heat when I was at Grantland. And Bill Simmons was a wrestling fan. Maybe not as much as I am, but he understands wrestling enough. He subscribes to the Wrestling Observer newsletter.
Sure.
And, when The Ringer started and they needed someone to be the co-host of the Masked Man show, I was here. And I was watching it again at that point. And then I'd always enjoyed talking about wrestling because I was on the message boards during the Attitude Era. And so I had already kind of established an interest in wrestling as an art and wrestling as a creative endeavor. Mm-hmm. And so it was easy to transition into becoming, sort of a part-time wrestling pundit.
Yeah.
And that podcast. And it became an obligation as much as it was a passion, unfortunately.
Well, it's similar for me as well because, like I said, I was watching, and certainly you do develop really strong opinions about what you're watching, and you get angry or happy, depending what's happening. But I never really had an outlet to express it. When I got hired by CBS, I actually was initially in the marketing department, and the guys that I happened to work with in that department really liked wrestling. So all of a sudden we're talking back and forth, and the passion for being opinionated about wrestling kind of started coinciding with the watching it. And I started becoming more passionate about WWE and wrestling in general during that time. And then over at CBS Sports, we hired Brian Campbell to be our first combat writer, I think, in website history that we ever really had. And Brian certainly had a massive passion for wrestling. And as he was developing his podcast, I got the opportunity to co-host that with him. And it was not an opportunity I ever expected or anticipated would really happen. And at first it was really rough for me. It wasn't something that I was totally comfortable doing. But I think after about 6-7 months, and I started, getting positive feedback from people, and then year 2 and then year 3 of that show, which is State of Combat, still does a great job covering MMA and boxing. It became a massive passion for me. While WWE may be disappointing us, I'll speak for both of us and say us right now, I do think that the world of wrestling is offering so many intriguing options that maybe didn't necessarily exist before, or even if they did, they weren't as accessible. So I'm not going to say I'm more passionate about wrestling than I ever have been. The Attitude Era was a really special time in my life, but the concept of once we stopped doing wrestling shows with State of Combat, just all of a sudden not talking about wrestling on a weekly basis, or only doing it like with 1 or 2 people in the office for 5 or 10 minutes each week, that was not an appealing lifestyle to me. So starting this podcast, getting over starting to talk to you, the conversation we had about wrestling in general, it really rekindled my passion for, hey, I don't just want to do a wrestling podcast. I want to do a wrestling podcast the right way. And I think you, Dave, bring a really unique mindset to it. And, like we said, the hope certainly is you're going to co-host as many episodes as possible, but we do both have real life and we don't know what's going to happen week to week, of course. But you bring a really unique perspective here as a former WWE writer. And this is something that obviously just recently happened in your life. And we don't necessarily need to go into full detail about your experience there on this first episode here. But I am kind of curious, when that opportunity existed and you decided to apply for it and then you got it versus how you came out of the experience, how much has your mindset changed about wrestling in general, not just specifically WWE?
Well, before I took the job, before I moved to Stamford and became a writer at WWE, which is still a weird thing to wrap my brain around. I had started getting into other stuff. I remember the first time I watched New Japan. Because New Japan, I didn't tape trade when I was a kid. I know a lot of wrestling fans were tape traders, and they would watch Japanese stuff. They'd watch, death matches and things of that nature. I didn't even have ECW because I lived in California, Central California. I know LA had ECW. I'm sure the Bay Area may or may not have had ECW, but in Farmtown, in California, there was no ECW. There was no ECW in Fresno. There was no ECW in Merced. There was no ECW in Bakersfield. This wasn't happening. So it was a steady diet of WWE and WCW for my entire formative wrestling years. I mean, I obviously saw ECW when ECW was invading to the WWF on Raw and whatnot. But that was it. And the aftermags would kind of give you a taste of like other things. But when I saw Omega and Okada, I was like, this is much better than everything I've been watching for the last 5 years. Why am I still watching WWE? This is incredible. Kenny Omega is on another level of talent. Okada is able to outperform and be more charismatic than people who speak my native language. So New Japan hooked me. The Bucks hooked me. All of the guys in the Elite, the Bullet Club, the whole thing. I was like, this is exactly what wrestling should be, and wrestling in America sucks. So at that time, as I was like starting to hate WWE and be really bored with it, the idea of maybe working there became tangible. I started making friends in the industry, and I started going to the WrestleMania after party and meeting wrestlers and meeting former writers and employees. And it's like, oh, I could actually do this while I'm also hating the product. And so going in, I was, kind of ambivalent about the product, but I was really into Becky Lynch. The whole Becky Lynch thing got me, as it did a lot of people, a lot of jaded wrestling fans, because it was organic and it was real. And then I get the job after finally deciding, I think my journalism career is over. I don't think I want to be a journalist. I want to be a television writer. And I think the best way to get my first TV writing credit is to take this job, because I knew people who could get my resume in front of the right employees at WWE, and that's what happened. And after a couple months of interviews and doing, a writing packet and all that stuff, I got the job. And it was surreal to find out that I was going to be moving to Connecticut and I was going to be writing professional wrestling after all of these years of being a fan. And so I was cynical up to the point when they said yes. We want to bring you in. I was very cynical about it. I had talked to plenty of people who were like, this is the worst job you'll ever take. Don't do it. You're going to be miserable. There's only one person who was like, yeah, man, it's going to be awesome. You're going to do a great job. Everyone's going to love you. Just, enjoy it. Everybody else was like, don't do this. Do not go. People who'd worked there before said, don't take it. You will be miserable. And they were right. That group of people was right. I was unhappy. I was miserable. So I came out hating wrestling. Again, the second time in my life I hated wrestling was after getting fired from WWE. I couldn't watch it. It made me physically ill to think about it. And then eventually I just got over it. It's like a breakup.
Mm-hmm.
You can't stand the thought of that person. And then eventually you see them at a grocery store or at a bar or something. And you're like, all right, it's fine. Who cares? We're both different people now. Unfortunately, WWE is the X that hasn't changed one bit.
Right.
And you still hate them anyway. Yeah, that was my experience. I came out of it far more cynical about the product because I know how the sausage is made. I have no illusions about what this is. So I think my perspective is unique because I can talk about it as both a fan and as a former employee.
Yeah, I mean, they always say, like the old saying goes, never meet your heroes, right? It's also like never work in WWE just because there's always that concern about it can't be as good as I've maybe built it up in my head to be, right? And even despite, like you kind of said, the warnings or, the concerns you might have going in, ultimately, you always believe in yourself whenever you start a new job. And it doesn't mean WWE anywhere, right? I can change things, right? I can be the catalyst or I've had all these thoughts in my head over all these years and I know what is necessary. But just because you're put in that position doesn't mean that people are going to listen to you. And I think that is maybe the experience that you had is maybe the best way to sum that up, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate certainly you, Dave, being here for this first kind of pilot episode of Getting Over. I hope everyone that is listening right now got a better understanding of who Dave and I are as professional wrestling fans, our journey from the very beginning all the way to this point. There's plenty more to come over the next days, weeks, months, and hopefully years even from the Getting Over podcast. Please follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast. You can follow me at Silverstein Adam. You can follow him at Dave Schilling. And Dave, you also have a wrestling newsletter. So why don't you tell the people how they can subscribe to that?
Yeah, so Twitter handle is at Dave_Schilling. There is an at Dave Schilling that is not me, that has gotten a lot of harassment on Twitter. I don't want to ruin his life again. Dave_Schilling. Okay,
I should have known that as the quote-unquote host of the show. Yeah, okay.
That's okay. Do your research, buddy. Come on. My newsletter is daveschilling.substack.com. Every week I do 2 columns. One is a WWE column on Tuesdays that covers NXT from the previous Wednesday. It covers SmackDown from that Friday, and then Monday's Raw from the day before. I'm not a huge NXT person. I find the product dull. So when I talk about NXT, it's a special occasion. So if you're a big NXT guy, I get it. I'm sorry. You can yell at me. If you want me to watch NXT, pay me $7 a month and I'll watch NXT for you. I'll watch it with very deep appreciation if you pay me. I know that sounds selfish, but guess what? It's a selfish world, buddy. And then I do an AEW column on Thursdays. I miss some weeks. I need to do my AEW column today. I'm sure there are a lot of people that are upset that it's not done yet, but guess what? I have a real job that pays for my bills. So if you want me to do more, you should pay me and I'll do more. It's that simple, kids. But subscribe. You can subscribe for free. You'll get the AEW column every week for free. You have to pay $7 a month for WWE, but you'll get pay-per-views, all the pay-per-views if I have the time and I buy the pay-per-view because AEW costs $60.
Yes.
Pay me and I will do the pay-per-view.
Yes.
It's that simple.
Yeah,
I don't understand how to explain it any easier than that. Pay me and I'll do whatever you want. I'm a whore and I will do anything. I'll be your private dancer if you pay me. I learned nothing from Mean Gene Okerlund how to get people to part with their money, but I did my best.
$60 though is cost prohibitive for some people. You do wonder what they would be
come
like.
on, people.
$39.99. You can go $39.99. What's the problem with that?
We're paying for Cody's tattoo removal.
We're paying for his entrances, is what we're paying for.
Oh,
So we'll repeat it again. At Getting Overcast, at Silverstein Adam, at Dave _Schilling.
Thank you.
All on Twitter. 5-star reviews on iTunes and wherever you're listening to the show. Again, I appreciate everyone for taking the time to listen to this pilot episode of Getting Over. There's going to be a lot more coming very soon. In fact, by the time you listen to this, there's probably going to be another episode waiting for you as well. So with that, for Dave, this is Adam. Bye for now.